I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, when are we going to stop having these once in a lifetime events? We dealt with COVID and now we're dealing with all these strikes and the interest rates and the high inflation across the board. And I could see how things could feel hopeless.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of talk with you about, where is the hope? How can we find hope during a time when it can appear as if it is hopeless?
Let's make green together. Let's make green together. Let's make green together. Let's make green together.
What's up, guys? Welcome to Black and Brown Make Green. I'm Natasha.
And I'm Damien.
And we have been having this conversation about hope because this year of 2023, it's kind of felt a little bit hopeless sometimes.
Yeah. Just
because things have been kind of crazy across many different industries, and with the cost of things going up and wages not going up. And so we've been trying to answer that question, where is the hope?
Yeah, I think we first identified this idea of bleakness or lack of hope when we were looking at housing prices and just how restrictive it is, sort of across the board, right? Like we were encountering articles and starting discussions up amongst ourselves about younger people and their inability to afford a house, right? And that's like one of the cornerstones to building a family. And, that's just a way to establish yourself and have, happiness.
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of people in America, at least, aspire to, is home ownership. And right now, the prices are so high, coupled with the interest rate when it comes to getting a mortgage loan is so high as well. So the monthly cost of paying for a house just seems astronomical in many areas.
Yeah.
Obviously, you do have your small towns and cheaper areas, but for the most part, a lot of areas, home prices are $400K plus, and then you add on an 8% interest on that, and then you add on property taxes and insurance cost, and you're looking at $3,000-4,000 at least per month just to pay for your housing, which is incredibly insane.
Yeah, and when we were talking about this, that's not when we came up with this idea of hopelessness. So, Tasha, what's the thing that we pointed to in terms of hopelessness?
Honestly, I had been watching some YouTube videos, not even based in the U.S., but based outside of the U.S., of younger people working multiple jobs in order to afford living. And then I also learned that these people in these other countries, I was looking at a Thailand video, they have student loans as well. Like it's an issue that people are dealing with across nations, is the student loans. And for people in America, the student loan payments are just about to restart in October. Those are becoming due. And that's an added expense that's coming back into people's budgets. And so I think people are starting to feel the hit of the different expenses, because adding those student loans back can cause a squeeze into your budget for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like there was that craze to start moving when COVID happened, like kind of in the midst of COVID, right? Where we're like, everybody's kind of scrambling to get to where they want to be, and then they start working from home, right? And
then 2023 hit, and these companies want to say back to the office.
Back to the office.
RTO, return to office.
Yeah. And not only that, but then the student loans are coming in and piling on top of that, right? So like the companies want us to come back to most likely higher cost of living places. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, like people have to balance the student loans. Gas prices are significantly higher now. Mm-hmm. Groceries are significantly like across the board. Everything is just
much more expensive.
It's kind of nuts, right? So like it does really beg the question, where is the hope?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and not to pile on, but we've also seen the issues of layoffs. I
Yeah.
mean, your industry has been hit hard. Your company has been hit hard. And
Yeah.
I mean, we've luckily been surviving the layoffs, but the tech industry has been hit. The auto industry has been going through a strike. The writers and actors are still on strike right now.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are not making money or are making much less money than before. And it's just a really hard time.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, when are we going to stop having these once in a lifetime events? We dealt with COVID and now we're dealing with all these strikes and the interest rates and the high inflation across the board. And I could see how things could feel hopeless.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of talk with you about where is the hope? How can we find hope during a time when it can appear as if it is hopeless?
Yeah.
One of the things that I was thinking about is expectations and
Okay.
defining your expectations and possibly adjusting your expectations. I feel as if we are living in kind of this luxury time where luxury is what is being pushed towards people via social media, via just looking at what other people are doing. And that is in regards to traveling. People are taking all of these luxurious trips or what appear to be luxurious trips, going out on yachts and going to these beach destinations and all these different places.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge shift from times before. Like when I was growing up, we didn't take these trips where you would go on a plane and go to this beach or go to out of the country. I've never traveled internationally, so I still haven't done that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it feels as if it's common. Like that's a common thing to do. People think it's a common thing to do. And I think a lot of people are striving for that, which drives up cost in one way. And then obviously there's the day-to-day living expenses as well that are being driven up in a different way.
So you never went on those kinds of trips growing up. Did you know anybody that did?
No, I did not. We went on road trips when I was growing up. So we drove to some states nearby.
Yeah.
And I remember my aunt and uncle going to Vegas one time, and they flew out to Vegas and their kids stayed with us. But no, I don't. I did have one uncle who they would go to Jamaica. They went to Jamaica pretty often.
Yeah.
But that's the only like international travel that I knew of anyone ever doing.
Yeah, I knew of one friend that would take they weren't lavish like you see nowadays, but they were, like a Disney trip or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Which probably now is a little more common, right? But yeah, same for me, like none of my friends, we never took any of those kinds of trips. We would always drive, we would always go to New Mexico road tripping. Mm-hmm. But I can't remember ever taking, it's not that I can't remember, it's that it never happened. We never took an international flight or anything like that.
So I think part of that hope is defining your own expectations and finding the hope in that, like finding your dreams, putting out your vision versus adopting someone else's vision. I think it's really easy for us to adopt the vision of others, whether that be our parents or our friends or our peers or celebrities or whoever it may be, but really taking the time to think about your own vision and what you really want versus the advertisements that are forcing its way into your psyche.
Yeah.
And, instead of relying on that, but really thinking about what you value and creating a vision for yourself so you can start to work towards that vision.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know what you mean. It's like when you're on Instagram and you're doom scrolling, 4 out of 5 of the photos you see are like of somebody doing something lavish, right? So outlandish.
Everybody's rich on Instagram.
I know. I know.
Or so it seems.
And it's, when you see that, you think, oh, well, that must be like the common thing. Like I'm thinking of a bell curve, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking of a bell curve. In the middle of the bell curve, the fat part, that's like where everybody is, right? That's where you perceive everybody to be based on what you see. But like in reality, I don't think it is that, right? I don't think people are doing this left and right like it seems like you see it, right?
Yeah.
Like you remember that story that one of our friends said where she was sitting on the couch with her brother and And she's like, "What are you doing?" And the brother replied, "Oh, I'm, posting pictures of me being on vacation." And he was sitting right there. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and I don't think that's uncommon, or maybe it's not uncommon. Maybe it's not as common as I would think it is, but like it does happen.
Yeah, social media is a portrayal of what people want you to know. You don't typically see the behind the scenes, the struggle, the whatever it is they're dealing with. You see the highlights, the things that are great. And that's why I say, instead of trying to create your vision based off of what you see other people doing, it's really important to create your vision based off of what you value and what's important to you.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel like I've really leaned into over this last year and this idea came from one of my best friends. She had said that she and her kids sat down and they did a vision board together. And I was like, oh, I love that. And so we did that as a family, like all four of us, you, me, and the kids. We each got a different crayon or marker. And, I'm not fancy. We just wrote down on a sheet of paper the things that were in our vision, the things that we wanted to do. And I feel like this year we've really been marching towards those things because we have that guiding light of, okay, this is what we want to happen in our lives. And some of this stuff is like big dreams. Don't know how it's going to happen. For instance, my son has on there to travel out of the country to Africa or something. And I'm like, we don't even have passports. I have one that I never used and it's expired now. But it doesn't even matter that it's a big dream that may seem unattainable. It's the fact that you have a vision and then you can just start moving towards it. And there's this hope that comes when you feel like you are making progress.
Yeah.
And so like for me right now, I feel extremely hopeful about my life and where it's headed because I feel like I'm making progress, even though with some of these dreams that I have written down, I have no idea how they're going to happen.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah. I like to think of this idea like this: writing down your goals, writing down your hopes and dreams, because like the Africa is kind of like a hope, right, for Isaiah. But I like to think of this like how you see leaves orient themselves toward the sun. And, the sun will move throughout the day and the leaves will reposition themselves. So they're pointing the leafy part towards the sun so they get maximal coverage. Like I like to think of it like that, like we're moving towards our goals. But first, before you even move towards your goals, you have to define them. You have to know that the sun is going to be in this position, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was really key for us, was defining our goals and really sitting down and thinking about, what it is we want and what is achievable too. And
honestly, I'm gonna cut you off right there for a little bit because it's not even goals though. Because for me, when I write goals, rather, my goals are SMART goals. They're very specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, relatable, all of that stuff. But when I wrote down my vision, it's not SMART. It's not a goal. It's just a big idea that I had. And I think it's okay to have this vision compared to having these goals, because the goals, like I've got specific steps of how I'm going to reach it. But the vision, like that stuff, they're not goals. They're just big ideas of things that I would like to happen to achieve in my life.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so that's one of the ways that I think you can find hope is by defining your own vision. And then once you do that, you can really start moving towards your own vision. Now, one of the things that we have to recognize is obviously we're all dealing with inflation. We're dealing with the higher costs. We're dealing with the wages that are not keeping up. And so how do you address that? Like, what are some ideas to deal with the rising costs? And this is something that we have to deal with as well. Like, we can't just, even though we are higher income, we can't just spend as if we have a never-ending amount of money, because that's not how it is. We have to budget, which, we've talked about over the last 2 episodes about the adjustments that we've had to make, because you have to be constantly aware of your spending and making adjustments as needed.
Yeah. And I think that in addition to that, we have to prioritize as well, because we can't have everything that we want all the time. And it goes back to what you're saying about social media. And it's not just social media. I think it's media in general. And it's not just media in general. It's the advertisements that are delivered through media in general. Because, I see, we talk about like the Instagrams and the TikToks, right? Where influencers are pushing their agenda on you, right? But in the same way, you also see, a TV commercial in a doctor's office about taking a trip to the Bahamas or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just another way of like making that the normal experience, normalizing travel to, to faraway destinations, which is nice. But that's not like an everyday occurrence, right? Like that's not a frequent occurrence unless you have it like that, right?
Yeah. I like what you said about prioritize, because that's definitely something that we have to do. And that is a key, something that you can do to keep your hope alive, is that you prioritize the things that you want.
Yeah.
And then you can work on them one at a time.
Yeah.
You may not be able to get everything at once. Like, for instance, we had to cut out vacation savings earlier this year until we got things in control. And so vacations was not a thing that we were planning for. And sometimes you just have to prioritize what are the things that's most important right now that can continue to bring me that joy that I want, even if I can't get everything.
Yeah.
And for us, that was date nights, which I'm sure you guys have heard about if you've listened to any of the previous episodes.
Yeah.
Like that is one of the things that we've prioritized.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like expenses, you can negotiate your expenses.
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking earlier today that back when we rented a condo, we negotiated the rent down.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do. We read, funnily enough, that you can negotiate the price. And I guess neither of us had really thought about that. We thought that, you just go into an apartment or a condo and somebody tells you that it costs this much to get in.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, okay, I guess it costs that much to get in. And then we pay that much.
Yeah. And I think I had negotiated once when I was right early on in college, but I had forgotten about it. And then I think we heard it on a TV show actually about negotiating your rent. And I was like, oh yeah, we should definitely do that the next time we rent somewhere. And so the next time we got ready to rent, we offered them to do a 2-year lease instead of 1, because we knew we wanted to be in the area for a longer time period. And we were able to reduce the rent cost by $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So rent is negotiable. Other things are negotiable. I have called my internet company before and been able to get it down. I actually just called the internet company last week trying to get it down.
Yeah, unsuccessfully, but...
Yeah, I don't really have any bargaining power right now.
Yeah, it does work sometimes, though.
It does work, yeah. But like with our internet right now, we have one provider that provides higher speeds. Like the other provider, it's 25 megabytes per second versus 300 megabits per second or higher. And 25 just ain't going to cut it.
Yeah.
So I can't say I'm going to leave y'all. Normally, I would say, well, I'm going to leave and go somewhere else if you don't reduce my price. But that's one thing that you can do. You can negotiate with your different providers. And it could be negotiating your rent. It could be negotiating your cell phone bill, negotiating whatever kind of bills that you have. Maybe you have a daycare provider or a babysitter and you want to try to get the rates down. You can negotiate things.
Yeah.
Everything is negotiable, I like to think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a good way and a good reminder because, in the end, you're dealing with people most of the time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a person on the other side you're talking to. And oftentimes that person understands that you may be going through things and that things are expensive and they may be willing to work with you. So I would just say be persistent. Yeah. Ask for the retention department.
And be willing to ask.
Yeah.
I think that it was a hard lesson for me to learn because it's like, I don't really want to ask for a handout. I don't want to feel like I owe somebody something and I feel like this is a favor. But it's not a favor. It's just an expectation, right? They expect people to ask for these, lower rates because everybody does it.
And there was a time when bartering was a thing where you're trading goods or services or whatnot. And so it's just kind of in that same realm of bartering, or so I think.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So definitely trying to reduce expenses is something to consider. Negotiating prices down is one way, but then also switching service providers without negotiating. For instance, with our cell phone bill, we used to be with AT&T, which has great service for our area, but is also very expensive.
Yeah.
And so probably about a year ago now, we switched to T-Mobile, which is cheaper. And even recently, you brought a different cell provider to me, similar to Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile is like $15 a month for unlimited data, I think it is, which is a really cheap price. And so that's something to consider too, like maybe switching service providers completely.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember the name of that one. My brother actually told me what it was. It was something like
US
US Mobile or something. US
Yeah.
Cellular. I don't know. I'd have to go back and find it, but the point is that there are alternatives typically. And if there are alternatives, then you have bargaining power. And if you have bargaining power, then you should ask, to lower your rates.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely look for ways to reduce costs because things are expensive right now. And
Yeah.
this is something that we are actively doing. It's not just it's for everyone, I would say.
Yeah.
One of the things that we like to use also is Microsoft Bing.
Bing, yeah.
You want to talk about why we use Microsoft Bing?
Yeah. This is like a silly. Okay, so we've talked before about extreme couponers, right? How it's not worth our time and effort to go and seek out those coupons, save them, find them when we need them, pull them out in the store, and spend 5 more minutes, like handing out the coupons. That's not our style. That's not our forte. But we use Microsoft Bing because there's 2 things that it offers us, and they're both kind of silly, but we really like it. One is that you can accumulate points just from searching, and they're called Microsoft points. And when you accumulate these Microsoft points, at some point you can convert them into something else, right? So it's like this make-believe Monopoly money, this currency that they have that you can convert into other things. And one of the things that we like to convert these Microsoft points into is Target gift cards. So we search and search and search on Bing pretty much, all day. 100 searches, 1,000 searches, I don't know, a lot of searches, right? And after a month, we'll have enough searches that have converted and created these Microsoft points to buy a Target gift card worth $5.
Yeah, so we're going to be on the computer using it anyways. And yes, you could use Google search engine or whatever is available. But with Microsoft, you get rewards just for searching.
Mhm.
And it's not really any difference to me. It doesn't really bother me any to be on Microsoft Bing versus being on Google. And it's no additional effort from me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm earning points every day just by searching because you can earn points by searching. They also have polls that you can do to earn points. And like you said, you can trade those points in for different gift cards. The one that we always get is Target, but there's also Starbucks and all these other sweepstakes you can enter.
Yeah.
But the one that makes sense for us is Target, and it's just an easy way to get a little reward. I feel like I'm rewarded.
Well, something I haven't told you is that I also enter the Xbox sweepstakes since you don't let me buy one. I haven't won yet, though, obviously.
I'm pretty sure I knew that you entered that sweepstakes, Damien. You do what you want with your points, okay?
Yeah.
So that's another way is using these cash back reward programs like Microsoft Search Rewards or whatever it is called. There's also like different apps such as Ibotta or different plugins that you can put on your search engine like Honey that can pull up discounts whenever you are shopping online, and it'll apply all the different coupons to see which ones work, which is something that we also use. So there are ways to try to reduce your cost across the board if possible. Those are a couple of ideas of how to do that.
Yeah. And that, I mean, like, why are you mentioning this, right? The reason why you're mentioning this is because it's hard, right? Like, you have a problem. It's like a big math problem with a bunch of variables, right? And this is one of the ways to tweak and tune that you have power over. And if you can control this, then that starts to give you a little bit of hope, right? Like I was thinking earlier when you were talking about the vision board, one of the and you were talking about how you like to create very broad, like put very broad action items on that vision board, right? I'm a little bit different, I think, in the sense that I like to have small, actionable steps that I can see getting completed as I march toward my goal, right? As I march toward my vision. And sometimes I make a bad step, right? Like a miscalculation. But I do like to finish things and know that I've completed something quickly, right? Instead of like in 10 years, like be able to afford this lavish vacation or something like that, right? Like some random idea.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. I'm saying the vision doesn't have to have all those little steps. Like once you have the vision, then you can start doing those little steps. And once you do those little steps, that's when your hope is built up because it's like, oh, I haven't made it to my vision, but I'm working towards my vision. And your hope is restored because you can see the progress that you're making.
Yeah.
So I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree.
One of the other things, when I called the Spectrum the other day, one of the things the lady on the phone told me was there is an affordable connectivity program to where, depending on your income level, you can get up to a $30 per month credit on your internet. That's not something that we qualify for, but for other people who may be trying to reduce costs, that may be an area to look at. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about reducing costs because things are expensive right now, and it can feel hopeless when you're looking at the amount of income you have compared to how much you're having to pay for things. And one of the things that you may have to do is to just literally cut some costs.
Yeah.
You got to cut some costs to get a little bit of room in your budget.
Right.
Give yourself some breathing room. So, and then the other thing is to join a Buy Nothing group. Have you heard of these Buy Nothing groups? I'm sure you've heard it from our crossing guard.
Yeah, I have. Because she likes to talk.
Yeah. Anyhow, so a Buy Nothing group is one where people can post things that they don't want anymore, and you can just claim it for free. And sometimes you can get really good things on there. So I'm not on one of those, but I've heard multiple people talk about things that they've gotten on Buy Nothing groups. So if you're in the market for something, that might be a good place to look for things where you don't have to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually even heard of people getting stuff from Buy Nothing groups, like furniture is what comes to mind. Mm-hmm. And they, like it's kind of like raggedy old furniture or raggedy old furniture. And they sand it down and then they, paint it, often specifically paint it white is what they said. And that sells and they resell it.
Yeah. I mean, if you are crafty in that way, I think that's a great thing to resell items that you find for free and to bring in some extra income. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you may not have things already that you own that you can sell, but if you can get something and repurpose it, I know that Our Rich Journey has talked about how that was one of the things that they did a lot when they were on their journey to financial independence is getting crates and things from these different companies or whatever and remaking it to sell. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about finding hope by creating your vision and then moving towards it, finding hope by reducing your expenses so that hopefully you can free up some cash in your budget. What are some other places to find hope?
I think one way to find hope or one way to find hope is to reach out to people, right? We always talk about the strength of relationships and forming those relationships and asking them for help, right? Like asking them for help in terms of like, hang out with me. Let's do something together. Mm-hmm. You have to protect your mental space, right? You have to protect your mental health. And I think that relationships, friendships, bonds with other people are a good way to go about doing that. Mm-hmm. And it's not hopeless, right? Like when you have that, that's more important than, I don't know, the financial stuff to me, right? Like mm-hmm. I think I would prioritize that higher than the financial stuff. So I think, for me, I would prioritize the friendships and relationships, and that gives me hope.
I completely agree with you. And I was going to say, I think that's the best idea for finding hope is by connecting with others.
Okay.
Because all this money stuff, it's important because we have to have it in order to survive. But what's the thing that's really important? And I think it is the relationships that you have with people.
Yeah, which is circling back on that previous thing that we mentioned, which was to define your values, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, once you have your values, once you recognize that this is what I really want, this is what I really need, then you can march towards that. You could just set that in your sight.
Going along with leaning on people, I think that, I don't know if this is going to happen, but I think that maybe we might move to a place where people are living more in multi-generational arrangements again,
Yeah.
or just multi-family arrangements again, as how they did many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I know my dad was recently saying that they, for a time, also had his great aunt with her kids living with them. So it was my grandma and her 3 kids, and my great aunt, and I don't know how many kids she had, but at least one was there, but she has more than one, living together in one home.
Yeah.
And with the cost of housing and trying to be able to afford a place to live, I think that might be a trend that people might move towards, is having homes that are more shared common spaces amongst multiple families.
Yeah, and I mean, you find evidence of this, right? Like your friend in LA, when she was living in a 2-bedroom apartment, but there were 4 people there, and there were 2 of them that were splitting the living room, like with a curtain that was hung up, to give them some privacy.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, even people in our neighborhood, some neighbors in our neighborhood, there's 4 different adults, non-related adults living in the home.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that I'm seeing in real life already, but I wonder if that's going to be a trend of just trying to survive these high prices.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that from what I read, there are a lot of young people that can't afford houses, right? And it's very tough. So they're living with their parents until they're, 25, because they're getting married later too, right? Like that is a trend.
Mm-hmm.
So, like marriage will probably make them move out more oftentimes than not. But, until then, it makes a lot of sense to stay with your parents, right?
Stay with your parents or stay with friends, someone. And it also could help with that mental health thing you were talking about, the most important part, which is really the relationships, at least in our opinion. And because you've got people who are right there with you, and you can hang out with them, and you can have that connection. And I think a lot of people are struggling with loneliness.
Yeah, and isolation.
Yeah, especially after the pandemic and everything. So I definitely think there's something about building ways to connect with others that can bring that hope back.
Yeah.
Bringing the most important thing back into focus.
Right. Really lean on your values.
Yeah. All right. So I think that even though sometimes it may seem as if things are hopeless, I always reflect back on my ancestors and the things that they went through and how they were able to pull hope when they were slaves and they had nothing.
Yeah.
And yet they still wanted to live. They had a desire to live and to make a better way. And all of the ones after getting out of slavery and the things that they did, farming and whatnot. And so I think that there's always hope. For me, I think there's always hope.
Yeah. I like that you look towards your ancestors, right? Because I think that's key, right? You draw power. It's like standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like that analogy. I hear it in my industry, but I like it just from a personal level too, because that's how I see my predecessors and my lineage. We don't share the same history, but we share the same idea that our ancestors had it a lot tougher than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And, we may feel isolated. Yeah, we may not be able to afford a house or have the things that we want or go on the trips that we want. But
we have so much.
We have so much.
We have so much.
And there's always hope. There's always something for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, we would encourage you to subscribe to the podcast by going to blackandbrownmakegreen.com/subscribe. And if you feel like you would like someone to talk through your money issues, hit me up, send me an email, natasha@moneywithconfidence.com. And again, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Join us for the next one, and let's make green together.
Let's make